what is the difference between all of the different manipulator types in Maya? So the first thing, let's actually pick an item that's easy to see. We're going to pick a cone just because we can see which way it's pointing here. So in Maya, there's kind of a couple of things that we're looking at when we're moving an object. We're looking at the manipulator here, and we're looking at the attributes in the channel box. These are the numbers, the values of where this object is positioned or rotated. So for example, if I take my object here and move it up in Y, the green axis, it moves up in translate Y. Great. Yay. If I move it in X, the red axis, it moves in X. Yay. But if we go through here, we have a lot of different movement types, and you can access these either by selecting your tool settings here, and you're going to see the list right there. Or my favorite way of doing it is just holding Control Shift and right clicking, and you'll be able to switch to any manipulator type right here. So let's say we have this object. I can switch from world mode to object mode right there. So what do these do? Essentially, what a manipulator does is it allows you to manipulate your object in a different way. The way I kind of view it is it's like repositioning your hand on an object. Imagine you're holding a pen like this from the tip, and you're trying to draw something. Let me go full screen again here so we can see. So you're trying to do this. This is going to be a pain to try and hold the pen just like that as you're drawing. So I can move my hand and grab it like this. Now this might make it a little easier. If I was to move the pivot point, I could even move my hand here, and now I'm holding it this way. It's just changing the way I'm holding an object, essentially, to make it easier to work with. An example is, let's say I'm holding my pen here, and I need to spin it like a top this way. Well, if I'm holding my hand this way, I can only go so far before my hand just stops. But if I re-grip my object here, now I can just spin this all the way around, just from this angle here. And I'm trying not to drop the pen so it's dipping all over the place. I don't want to drop my pen. I've done that enough times. But I can suddenly spin this much easier this way than if I'm holding it like this. And now that's going to be much harder to do. So that's the way I usually think about it. So let's kind of look at an example in Maya. Right now, if I switch from, we're going to just stick to the translation manipulator for now. If I switch from world mode to object mode, we see no difference. It just moves the same way. And Wookie, thank you so much for the sub. Aw. And yes, the kittens are still scratching and biting. Not quite as bad. I've got the scars. They're not going to go away at this point. But they're almost ready to start coming into the office. They're stopping their wire chewing. So soon we might have stream cats. So I got distracted there. So with this object, right now we don't really see a difference. Where we're going to see a difference is when I start rotating the object. So right now I'll switch my manipulator to world mode. So if I do this and then I rotate my object, you'll notice that the manipulator, the translation, stays exactly where it was before. So if I move this up in Y, it goes up, and everything else just stays the same. And so thank you so much for the sub as well. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I'll answer the question about the kittens in just a second. I'll just finish this demo here. If I start talking about cats too soon, we're never going to get back onto a demo. So right now the manipulator is still aligned in this way, which is great. I can move the object straight up. Perfect. Easy. But what if I don't want to move it up just straight? I want to move it along the axis of the object to the point. Imagine this is a spaceship and we're trying to have it fly through space. Right now, this is going to be a nightmare. I want it to go this way, diagonally, right up there. Okay, move this up here, and then it's kind of going at a weird angle here, so I have to move it in X and then Z. Oh, it needed to go higher up here, and needed to go back there. It's a pain. You're having to do all of these adjustments just to get this straight line right there. So this is where I would switch to object mode. So if I, again, hold Control, Shift, right click, switch to object mode, you'll notice that the manipulator lines up with the object. So now I can just go, whoop, done. If I need to have it go down, I can just have it rotate like this. Whoop, there we go. Now, does this change anything in the back end of Maya? No. If you look at the values, I'm moving it in the y-axis, but now all three translations are changing. This is what it gets very confusing when you're first starting out. You think you're just moving it in y, that's the y-axis, the green axis right there, but it's moving in all three. What the heck? Is because this is the up direction, the y-axis of the object. So same thing, like this is the top of my head. If I was flipped upside down, that would still be the top of my head. It's not now the bottom of my head. I guess technically it could be, but it's still the top. It's what I would consider the top of me, and I'm upside down. This is the top of the object, and it's going to point in that direction. It's just a different way of moving the object. It's not rechanging your actual values of where it's positioned. These are, you can think of these as like the global coordinates. Your like coordinates if you were looking at a map or a GPS device kind of thing. So that's really what manipulators do, is it just gives you a different way of moving things along a certain axis. So for example, a component here, this will line things up either to your edges or your faces or something like that. Normally for translations, honestly, the big things that you're going to use are object and world right here. But what we can do is we can set a custom axis as well. So here, if you had a parent-child relationship, you could set it to follow the axis of whatever parent object it's connected to. But one of my favorite things is, let's say I had an object here. So we're going to take a cube. And let's kind of think about a scene where this would be useful. Let's say you've got a skateboarder who is going across the scene here, and they've just hit the rail right here, and now they need to grind along this rail. But this rail, right now it's lined up with the axis of the world, so you can see how that X right there is perfectly lined up. What if it's at a weird rotation and angle, like so? How the heck am I going to get that to follow along? So I could place this right here, and well, I could scoot it over. No, now I have to go up, now I have to go back. Ugh, it's already a pain here. So I could try to switch back to world mode. Well, that's not going to be any more help. It's going to misalign itself right there. Such a pain. So if I just place this where I want it to be, I can then take my manipulator. I'm going to hold down Control Shift, right click, go to Axis, Custom, and I'm going to set it to an edge. Set to edge right here. And I'm just going to select the edge of this cube right there. And now my manipulator is lined up with that object. So now imagine we're animating that skateboarder. He comes in, hits the rail, whoop, right along. Regardless of the angle, right through there. I can key that in place. As the character then jumps off, I can now switch my manipulator back to object mode or world mode and keep animating. So again, does it change your actual mathematics in the background? No, it's just realigning the way you're holding the object and how you can move it in space. That's all it's doing. The same thing happens with the... Oh, and if I change the gizmo to objects instead of world, will that affect the curve in the graph editor? No. So the curve in the graph editor is based on the values here. So once again, it's all world space. It's where is that object in relation to the axis of the planet, I guess you could say. So the up and down, translate Y, is always going to be up and down. Even though right now my up and down, my translate Y axis is kind of pointing to the side, in the graph editor, it'll always be based off of world mode. So straight up, straight down like that. So it can be kind of confusing, but as long as you kind of think of the manipulators as just a way of aligning things, that's really all they are doing. And then your values are their own thing. That's your global positioning, essentially. And this also goes into rotations, and rotations is where we tend to see that more. And I remember when I was a student, that was the one that really confused me whenever I was doing rotations, because it seems so simple. It just seems like it should work, and it doesn't. So let me reset this object here, and we're going to go over that. So for rotations, once again, we have a lot of different axes. We're going to have object, world, and then usually we're going to use gimbal. So those are the three that we tend to use with rotations. Honestly, like everything else, the custom rotations, all of those are things I use once in a blue moon, super rarely. The big ones are going to be object and world in translation, and then object, world, and gimbal in rotation. So once again, world mode lines up with the world. So if I rotate this object here and then switch back to, let's make sure that's in world mode here, you'll notice that the manipulator doesn't move. It just stays lined up with the world as is, which is really good when, for example, let's say I need this to sit at a 45-degree angle here with this edge on the ground, and then I need it to spin as if it's a top, just spinning around. Well, if I do this, I can just do that. Perfect. It's spinning as if it's on a flat surface. Great. Object mode follows along with the object, and that would make it much harder. If I want to do that spin like a top, well, I can't really do that now. I'd have to do all sorts of weird manipulating to get that to happen. That's going to be a pain. But with object mode, it lines up with the object. So if I need the object, imagine you're animating, again, maybe a plane that's flying through the air, and then its wing gets shot off, and then it has to just spin as it's going through, just still going in a straight line in an arc, but now it's lost a wing and it's just doing this barrel roll. I can just do this. So it's just moving along that arc and just rotating and spinning as it goes. Nice and easy. Whereas if I was in world mode, that would be very hard. You can see I'm just getting these random tumbling motions. Okay. So pretty self-explanatory there, not too hard. What makes it tricky is that the rotations work differently than translations. Whereas translations, the world manipulator, so if I'm in world mode, this moves and matches what I'm seeing here. So X is going to be X, Y is going to be Y, Z is going to be Z. That's mostly the case for most objects. There are going to be exceptions based on how it's rigged, but you'll usually see that. With rotations, let's go back in here. So object mode, if I start rotating this, you'll see very quickly I can get into a position where I'm rotating the Z and all three are moving. Okay, well, we saw that with the translations. I was in object mode and I'd move it and it would affect all three. Okay, cool, because it's an object mode. Yeah, it makes sense. But let's switch to world mode. So if I do Z, okay, that's good so far. I've just moved in Z. Let's do X. Well, it's moving all three again. Why? Why is it moving all three? I'm supposed to be in world mode. Why is it not following the world axes? This is because rotations are a gimbal system. A gimbal system is when you have three axes that all spin together and have to work with each other. And a true gimbal system is not going to work within a world or object orientation. It's just impossible mathematically. So the world manipulator here is showing us the rotations lined up to, again, the planet, the scene, the world. So spinning in Y is always going to be doing this rotation, for example, but it's not going to show us the true rotations. To see true rotations, we need to switch to gimbal mode. So that's why we have this here. Gimbal mode will show you the exact axes. So if I move this in Z right here, you'll see it moves in Z. If I move it in X right here, it only moves in X. If I move it in Y, only in Y. So now I am getting the true specific one axis at a time. Now, is that good? Should you only ever be using gimbal mode? Because hey, now you have full control over one axis at a time. I used to think that. So this was back when I was in like class 3 or 4 at Animation Mentor. I started using almost exclusively gimbal mode because now I have full control over my curves. I know exactly what's happening at all times. But what I found out very quickly was it's such a pain, because once again, let's say I want this to spin like a top right here. Well, now I have to figure out how to rotate all of these together to get this to happen. It's such a pain. Honestly, these values don't really matter. If they're going in all 3 axes at the same time, as long as the animation is doing what you want it to do, that's the important thing. So nowadays what I'll do is I'll just animate an object in world mode almost 90% of the time and only use gimbal for certain moments. Now, with that said, we do have to be careful of one thing with rotations and all of these manipulators, and that is when you get gimbal lock. So gimbal lock in animation is when you get 2 axes that line up, and you'll get this with any type of gimbal system. So for example, if I take my object here and rotate it in Y, notice how the X axis moves but the Z doesn't? If I get to this point right here, the Z axis and the X axis are both doing the exact same motion. This is gimbal lock. I've lost a degree of motion essentially because 2 of them are just doing the same thing. That's a whole other discussion, and I've done videos explaining how to avoid these and how to really think about them so you can avoid them completely, or as much as possible at least. But that's kind of the one big thing we have to watch out for with these manipulators. Aside from that, just use whichever manipulator works best for the moment. That's really all we need. I hope that all makes sense. Hopefully that was clear enough and kind of gives an idea of how to use these. Kind of as this quick summary is, the manipulators just allow you to readjust how you move an object to make it easier in the moment. And they don't have any effect on the animation at the end. It's just how do you move the object, how to make it easier on yourself essentially. So yeah, let's see. So let me go up here. I've missed a few questions. Hey, mine. Hey, I'm glad the demo on the vanilla walk is helping. Nice. Let's see. Sometimes when I edit the curves in the graph editor, it doesn't rotate the way it's supposed to. It updates differently in the viewport as opposed to when I use the manipulator to move things. So in that case, what you need to do is switch to gimbal mode, and that's going to show you exactly, like as you move it in the graph editor, it'll move the same way with the manipulator. So right now you're probably looking at it in either world or object, and they're just not going to line up. Same thing with the translations. If you've got your manipulator in object mode with the translations and you're trying to translate it, it's not going to line up with the manipulator if there's any bit of rotation to that object. So it's just kind of being aware that the manipulator does not equal the exact mathematical connection in there, the exact mathematical motion that you were getting from the graph editor or from these values here. The manipulator is just a visual representation of how we are holding and moving the object. Yeah, parent space is following the parent object. So for example, make sure my tablet is working here. If I had another object here, let's take a disk, and I'm going to parent the, let's see. So the cone is the parent, and then the disk is the child right here. So right now, everything's going to line up because they're both following the same axes. But let's actually take this, and I'm going to rotate this to point off in this direction. And now we're going to parent that again. So this is pointing diagonally. This is pointing straight up. If I work in world space, the axis is going to point straight up for both. If I set this to object space, this is going to follow the object here and then the object here, each individually. But if I set this to parent space, this is going to just be essentially world space because it has no parent. Well, I guess technically the parent of this object is the world. It's following the world itself. So it's going to just be in world mode. But then this object is going to follow the orientation of this one. So it's following its parent object right there. So if I rotate this now, this is still going to follow in that direction. So it follows whatever is above it in the hierarchy.